Let's begin. So, good morning, bienvenue, bonjour, ladies and gentlemen. Big warm welcome to the 2023 ARE Energy Access Investment Forum. We are still very happy to continue doing this in person, as we know. It's been a year and a half since we started ignoring COVID, and still I always appreciate it when we can actually meet together. As I mentioned very briefly, there are headsets available. Il y a des casques avec la traduction. So if you would like to listen to the words being spoken on this stage, you're welcome to take one. It is a great pleasure to see such a massive crowd present today. We have more than 500 people registered for on-site participation. As you can see in this room and everything outside, I think we've certainly hit that. And there is also 1,000 plus people online dialing in. So there is Big Brother available. That is listening to what is being said here. So all in all, more than 1,500 people for this Energy Access Investment Forum, which is a big record and for which I thank you for your participation. So the event over the next 3 days would not have been possible, of course, without the support of our partners, supporters, and members. Certainly, this year's event co-hosted with our colleagues from the African Development Bank, notably the CEFA and the EMA program, and of course supported in a long-standing fashion by our friends from Get Invest and Prospect. This year we have the GIZ Green Burger Energie as a strategic partner, and our partners, other strategic partners include the ADEME, so the French Ecological Transition Agency, the Club ER from the African Rural Electrification Authorities. Harry, I don't know where you are, but you are here. CORE, our program together with ICA and several other main stakeholders, the Desert to Power team, the Energy Catalyst, the IFC, that's a first as a big partner for an ARE event, and then UNIDO. On the company side, we are super happy to note the continued support of notably Mr. Fuchet and his colleagues from Schneider Electric here on the stage today as a diamond sponsor. Of course, Gillian Alexandre from NG Energy Access is here as well. The International Copper Association as a gold sponsor, ADA, Luxembourg Microfinance, EDP, the Portuguese utility, the Zayed Sustainability Prize, it's a new colleague of ours from Abu Dhabi, Greeno, as well as the IREC Foundation, Enreca International, and Turbulent. Of course, I would also like to give a big shout out to all our other supporting partners for this event, especially our colleagues, our homologue on the national level here in Africa, with whom we have bilateral cooperation agreements, a lot of which are here today through business delegations and government delegations from the respective countries, and all of you in the audience from private sector, public sector, financiers, and beyond. As we know, as always, as we say with ARE, we do encourage companies that are not yet working with us in this particular sector to consider joining, as we have a special EAIF only discount for the fast deciders. There is a big exhibition just outside of the gates here, where you will find a lot of fantastic booths, including ours, where you can discover this special offer. Very briefly on, well, the topic, perhaps, of today. In terms of investment, as we know that the current investment is far from sufficient to meet the targets. About 11 billion USD is invested annually currently across energy, renewable energy in all countries, but that is certainly not the lion's share going to distributed renewable power. So first, we know that it's actually 35 billion that we need every year USD as an annual investment to meet the access targets. And we need those to be the right types of investments. We've said it before on our events, I'll say it again, distributed renewables have been independently, so by the IEA, assessed to be the cheapest solution for more than half of all new connections required to achieve SDG 7. More than half. So in terms of financing, I think we can use events like this one to leverage it up a notch. And given that we have more than 100 investors signed up for the show today, I think certainly I'm positive for the future in this respect. Of course, not only public sector will be able to do these investments, and public sector will crowd them in, will set up de-risking facilities and all those things, but the majority of the money will come from private sector at the end of the day, and this is why it's so important to be working together to really make this transition happen. Beyond the classic of public and private investment, we see in ARE, even inside our membership, increasing interest from demand-side industry to also invest in renewables. This includes mining, telecom, connectivity, e-mobility, agriculture, you name it, industries that are in peri-urban remote areas that actually transition to renewable energy. So concretely, CNI and how to do CNI in an inclusive way that also meets electrification goals. So last but not least on the financing types, we note also in the B2B discussions, there is a great interest in this conference for climate financing, everything ranging from renewable energy credits, carbon credits, and all the associated ones as we are in the run-up to the COP later this year in the UAE. So in terms of the challenges, perhaps we need to address especially these three challenges in our opinion. First, we need to do more activities like this to bring together domestic as well as international companies and investors to actually mobilize these investments to make the connections happen. Second, as I mentioned, the investment instruments need to be tailored to the market. So that means concretely lower funding floors and a higher openness to at least bundled projects. And then third is helping our companies in this sector to be increasingly ready for commercial investment, right? It's the same if you look at the parallel of renewable energy, for instance, in the European Union. In the beginning, it always is a big investment because you want to have a bottom of the pyramid approach. But then after 5, 10 years, the market sustains itself, and this should be no different in this respect. The last thing in terms of investment is that to encourage this, it's also important to leverage the innovation and improve the way that we coordinate and exchange with the different actors. Here, I would like to salute our colleagues from UNIDO on these different campaigns to work with the demand-side industries. In terms of the long-term sustainability, we can point out the program we have with our partners from the International Copper Association, with Steve Kukoda, who is somewhere in the room here today, with whom we have initiated notably the CORE initiative. This is supporting the training of local practitioners, so on the ground, to, on the technical aspects of electrification. So things like system design, installation, operation, maintenance, supporting the development of a strong domestic DRE workforce. In a project we have with the German foundation CAS, we see that 70% of our companies in our membership struggle to find the right talent on the ground, and so this is a very concrete sort of initiative that we like to do. In collaboration with ADEME, so on the French side, we are also finalizing a study on the productive use appliances. So again, not only the supply, but also the demand of electricity in different countries in Francophone Africa. And we will build on this to do awareness-raising campaigns, including in Cameroon, notably as saluting our colleagues here in the front, to create and build the demand even further. So, building on all of the above, we invite our organization to work together with us, with all the other partners that are here together today, to do business, to do investments, and in so doing, actually help concretely electrify the world. Helping you do that is our new brain data platform supported by Get Invest, which is in the room behind you, which is a completely new concept for us. So we'd love your feedback after the show. So far, it seems widely popular. So I would like to invite you to make use of that, to network and learn from other brilliant people like yourself in one-to-ones or groups up to 5 on specific topics. You can do this throughout the day. There are dedicated sessions, but you can do it anytime, anywhere. And the colleagues outside at the Brain Data Desk will be able to assist you. So I encourage you to check your schedules and participate through the event app. And then the last announcement is we'll have, at the end of the third day, for the brave ones who will be here still for the closing remarks, we'll have 3 prizes for the most engaged participants in the business matchmaking section. So I would highly encourage you to do your business and, let's say, be one of the awardees who will be invited up on the stage. So thank you very much for your patience and for listening briefly. Now I would very much like to give the word, first of all, to our co-host, the African Development Bank, represented at the highest level by Dr. Kevin Kariuki, Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate and Green Growth. Mr. Kariuki, would you like to come to the stage? Well, to the front.
Good morning, everybody, and as they say, this part of the world, Akwaba. David Lecoq, CEO of Alliance for Renewable Energy. the EC delegation head, Ambassador Francesco Di Mauro, colleagues from the Ministry of Energy and Schneider, Excellencies, members of diplomatic corps, representatives of our partner institutions, renewable energy proponents, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I am most pleased to note the tremendous growth of the Energy Access Investment Forum, or just EAIF. EAIF, which is organized by Alliance for Rural Electrification, has grown in leaps and bounds by the year, attracting larger groups of innovators and industry leaders, project developers, as well as financiers. It is today the gold standard of investment forums on decentralized renewable energy. Congratulations, David. I am particularly proud that this year's edition of EAIF is being held in Abidjan, the home of the African Development Bank, and that both the African Development Bank and the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, or just SEFA, are both co-hosting the event. Unless one asks who SEFA is, let me clarify that SEFA is a multi-donor special fund managed by the African Development Bank, through which the bank has since 2012 supported many African renewable energy projects through project preparation and upstream sector support. Since 2020, the support has extended to catalytic financial instruments such as concessional loans, junior equity, and investment grants. But to contextualize the role of distributed renewable energy, I'll just call it DRE, in rural electrification, permit me to recount the status of Africa's electricity. Prior to the onset of COVID-19, Africa had enjoyed 7 years of progressive increase in electricity access. Then comes the pandemic and its various degrees of disruptions due to economic lockdowns, and 30 million people lose electricity supply as they could no longer afford it. According to the 2022 Africa Energy Outlook by the IEA, in 2021, 4% fewer people had access to electricity compared to 2019 in Africa. And today, 600 million people, or 43% of the continent's population, lack access to electricity. According to IEA, accordingly, IEA projects that to attain SDG 7, that is universal access to electricity by 2030, 90 million people per year will have to be connected. This means tripling the rate of access of recent years. So how can we achieve this? The one thing I know for a fact, it is not by extending the interconnected grids. The lead times for such projects are too long due to the long-term planning and construction periods that are required, not to mention the substantial funding that is required. DRE, as we all call it, solutions are, in my view, central to meeting universal energy access targets on the continent. Indeed, it is projected that DRE, comprising green mini-grids and solar home systems, will account for more than 50% of new connections by 2030. But we should not expect that it will be a walk in the park, not by any means. Establishing commercially viable DRE projects is quite difficult. They hardly generate sufficient revenue for debt service as well as operation and maintenance of the systems, while equity returns, if any, are unattractively low. Hence, DRE solutions presently depend on subsidies and high concession financing. Other challenges include inability to raise debt in local currency, affordability issues, and regulatory risks, including the risk of unbundled country tariffs, which means that low uniform tariffs are sometimes imposed in certain jurisdictions to address affordability. To address these challenges, the African Development Bank has formulated programs and initiatives to overcome these barriers and spur as well as scale up private sector financing to DRE projects. As you heard from David, it is expected that private sector will be central and play a big role in distributed renewable energies. An excellent example in this regard is the Africa Mini-Grid Market Acceleration Program, or just AMAP as we call it. AMAP seeks to facilitate private sector development of green mini-grid projects. AMAP will unlock up to $600 million of private sector financing for green mini-grids. The first phase of AMAP targets Angola, Mali, Madagascar, Mauritania, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and Chad. Moreover, to enhance the commercial viability of DRE projects will be integrated with rural economic activities, such as small businesses and industries that hinge on productive use models to increase project revenues and improve profitability. Another example is the COVID-19, what we call off-grid recovery platform that provides relief and recovery capital to renewable energy projects whose cash flows were adversely affected by the pandemic, thereby guaranteeing continuity of electricity services and giving hope for a more viable and robust post-COVID DRE sector. Through the over 50 million COVID-19 off-grid recovery platform, over 750,000 additional connections will be established and 500 new jobs created. Lastly, I would like to cite the Leveraging Energy Access Facility, or LEAF, program as another example of a bank intervention that seeks to address barriers to private sector participation in DRE. In this instance, LEAF will provide local currency commercial debt and guarantees to scale up decentralized and distributed renewable energy projects, including solar home systems, green mini-grids, and commercial as well as industrial solutions. We cannot, however, do it alone. I therefore look forward to the bank coordinating and synergizing with other financing partners for impactful impacts. This could entail, for instance, sharing of due diligence information, as well as coordinating larger financing packages for more efficient development and deployment of resources as we train our collective sights on the noble goal of affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. With these few remarks, I commend the ARE team, our SEFA team, and all others who have played a role in organizing this year's edition of EAIF. I wish you all fruitful deliberation and a wonderful 3 days here in Abidjan. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kariuki, for your warm welcoming remarks, and once again for your support to make activities like this a possibility. Next, I would like to give the word to Ambassador Francesca Di Mauro, Ambassador of the European Union delegation to Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. Madam Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Mr. CEO of IRV, thank you very much for the invitation. the Vice President of the African Development Bank, the Director General of the Ministry of Mines, Energy and Petrol of Côte d'Ivoire, CEO, good distinguished guests, excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here today representing the European Union for the opening of this very important forum, the RE Energy Access Investment Forum 2023, to discuss indeed a very important topic, which is access to energy for all citizens. The European Green Deal, if you haven't heard about it, was launched in 2019, and it is really the roadmap that the EU has given itself to guide the green transition. And this green transition is to be happening both within Europe, but also it really guides our engagement with partner countries around the world. Today, energy is more than ever a major concern for citizens and governments. We've heard it all over, in Europe and outside of Europe. We have witnessed the dramatic consequences that Russia's military aggression of Ukraine had on energy markets at global level. Already after, the COVID crisis that, as we've heard, of course, already had an impact on these energy prices. Our partner countries have been particularly vulnerable to the disruption and volatility in energy markets, which have triggered serious economic consequences and hampered efforts to close the energy access gap. But I also like to mention other gaps that need to be reduced by using electricity and energy, like economic transformation, digitalization. All of these depend very much on energy access. This context stresses the need to scale up the deployment of renewable energies and to encourage the long-term development of resilient and sustainable energy markets. We've already heard, and I can reiterate indeed, that currently we are not on track to reach SDG 7 by 2030, which is to achieve universal access to sustainable energy services. We need a bold acceleration of efforts and investment. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, a total of nearly 200 billion is required to reach universal electricity access. We've heard also in terms of how many million people have to be connected every year. The reason we are here today is to address the opportunities that decentralized renewable energy, DRE, as we call them, this solution can offer in this context. International institutions such like IRENA have highlighted the central role that this solution can play, with approximately 1/3 of people in Africa who would have access to electricity through off-grid solutions in 2030. And indeed, the off-grid solar sector has grown very rapidly over the past decade and now serves 420 million users globally, with further growth predicted, and also as indeed this technology is becoming cheaper. So it is really one of the solutions we can use. However, it is not just about money, and indeed it is also about speed of delivering. Interconnection do take time. New generation does take time. So speed of delivering clean and affordable access in rural areas is important, and this DRE can be a solution. It is also thousands of jobs that can be created, especially in remote rural areas that I see maybe that you will also be visiting those during these 3 days. And so also these medium enterprises can actively engage in the green economy and, as I said, economic transformation. Overall, it is the just energy transition in the making. Despite encouraging trends, major financial, economic, and policy hurdles remain and hamper the delivery of energy access at the necessary pace. Through its partnerships, the EU remains committed to supporting the strengthening of policy and regulatory framework with the goal of aligning cost, reliability, quality, and affordability. So indeed, the policy side of things is extremely important. That is why I'm very happy to see also the ministry represented here today. Now, speaking concretely, how does the EU support the uptake of clean energy investment? Our overall response is called Global Gateway. This was launched in 2021, and it is the EU's offer to its partners to accelerate the energy transition by supporting investment, but also by enhancing the regulatory framework to make this investment possible. Now, Global Gateway is our overall strategy and initiative that covers all sorts of connectivity, so also digital and infrastructure, and also connecting people through education and health, but I will zoom now only on energy. And Global Gateway is delivered through what we call a Team Europe approach, meaning bringing together the EU member states, and also their financial and development institutions, such as the European Investment Bank, who is also represented here today through Jane Feehan, the resident representative here in Abidjan. It also seeks to mobilize the private sector. Indeed, without the private sector, we cannot make it, to leverage investment for a transformational impact. In terms of figures, between 2021 and 2027, Team Europe will mobilize up to 300 billion globally of investment in digital, climate and energy, transport, health, education and research. And of these, 150 billion are being reserved for Africa, so half of it. In Africa, our main flagship project on energy is what we call the Africa-EU Green Energy Initiative, which aims to contribute to Africa's ambition to increase renewable energy generation capacity by 300 gigawatts by 2030 and secure access to affordable, reliable and sustainable energy. We will deliver on this objective by supporting renewable energy generation and interconnection projects, so we will still do that, including the broad rollout of decentralized energy solutions, but also strengthening regional energy markets and interconnection. And here in West Africa, we have the WAP, the West African Power Pool. We will also support the regulatory environment by technical assistance, policy dialogue, capacity building. In terms of decentralized renewable energy solution, this includes rural electrification policies and planning, technical standards and monitoring mechanism, level playing field for distributed renewable electricity and mini-grid auctions. So how we will do all this? As I said, through a set of innovative arrangements and financial instruments that leverage public and private finance. You already, I hope I have heard about Electrify, the Electrification Financing Initiative, which is a partnership between the European DFIs and the EU, established as a financing scheme to bridge the gap in access to financing. Electrify invests in early-stage private enterprises that increase or improve access to reliable and sustainable energy in many countries. I have some examples: Benin, Burundi, Côte d'Ivoire, DR Congo, Eswatini, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, the Pacific, Uganda, and Zambia. We also have the EFSD Plus, the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which is a guarantee scheme, which will make available up to 135 billion for guaranteed investment for infrastructure projects between 2021 and 2027. Indeed, we've heard about the risking. This is exactly what the FSD Plus is planning to do. And we will couple this guarantee with 18 billion in grant from the EU budget and funding from the EDFIs up to 145 billion in planned investment volume. So all of this together, this is how we plan to do it: guarantees, grants, and then investment from our DFIs. And all of this, of course, to leverage private investment. So blending guarantee, technical assistance, and also that is where the policy dialogue becomes important when we talk about business environment, because in the end, investors will come if the business environment is conducive, open, transparent, and with clear rules. Finally, let us not forget that this increased financing will have to be framed by a policy dialogue, indeed. Conclusion, I'm concluding now. We stand at the crossroad where shift in technology, geopolitics, climate, and energy demand will redefine the energy landscape for years to come. If the past 10 years of progress in the field of energy are an indication of how far we can go in the next 10 years, then there's a lot of hope for the future. This forum is an opportunity to make this hope become a reality. I wish you all very fruitful discussion, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Indeed, also on behalf of ARE, we are very grateful for the continued support and increasing support of the European Union for renewables, and in particular distributed renewables, including such as through the Global Gateway and the FSD Plus and Electrify, and all the fantastic instruments, because indeed, as with the AFDB and our other partners, this makes the difference on the ground. An event is where you meet, and then you have to find these investments, and then you can actually build it. This is why it's all quite important. Mais on a aussi le gouvernement de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui est représenté ici aujourd'hui, si je passe rapidement en français, le temps de vous donner pour les écouteurs. Je donnerai la parole à Monsieur Sabati Cissé, qui est le directeur général de l'énergie, le DGE, représentant le ministre M. Mamadou Sangafoa Coulibaly. Alors, M. Sabati, on est très heureux d'être chez vous en Côte d'Ivoire, de retour. Toujours un grand plaisir et merci pour votre participation. À vous.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, vous avez fait une bonne transition parce que vous avez basculé et vous m'avez annoncé en français. Ça me permet donc de continuer en français. Alors, Excellence, Madame l'ambassadeur pour la délégation de l'Union européenne, Monsieur le vice-président de la BAD, de la Banque africaine de développement, Monsieur le directeur de l'Alliance pour l'électrification rurale, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des institutions, Mesdames et Messieurs les participants à ce forum, Mesdames et Messieurs de la presse, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais, avant tout propos, vous présenter les excuses de M. Mamadou Sangafoa Coulibaly, ministre des Mines, du Pétrole et de l'Énergie, qui n'a pu être parmi nous ce matin. En effet, au moment même où se tient ce forum, Monsieur le ministre prend part à un conseil de gouvernement. Pour ce contretemps, indépendant de sa volonté, il a bien voulu donc me désigner pour le représenter à ce forum. C'est donc pour moi un réel plaisir et un devoir de prendre la parole ce matin à l'occasion donc de l'ouverture de ce forum. Je voudrais souhaiter la bienvenue en Côte d'Ivoire à toutes les personnes qui ont fait le déplacement et leur souhaiter de passer un agréable séjour. Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi de rappeler que l'Alliance pour l'électrification rurale a choisi la Côte d'Ivoire pour abriter le 5e forum d'investissement pour l'accès à l'énergie qui s'est tenu les 13 et 14 mars 2019. Aujourd'hui, donc en 2023, l'honneur est à nouveau fait à la Côte d'Ivoire d'accueillir cet important événement qui regroupe les participants, les principaux acteurs du secteur donc, de l'électrification décentralisée. Par ce geste, vous renouvelez une fois de plus votre confiance en la Côte d'Ivoire et en ses autorités. Je voudrais donc, à ce titre, au nom du gouvernement ivoirien, vous exprimer notre profonde gratitude pour cette marque de considération à l'endroit donc de notre cher pays et vous rassurer que la Côte d'Ivoire est disposée à toujours accueillir des événements de telle ampleur. Mesdames et Messieurs, le présent forum d'investissement est co-organisé par l'Alliance pour l'électrification rurale, la Banque africaine de développement, et le Fonds pour l'énergie durable pour l'Afrique, je pense. Et le forum est soutenu par Get Invest et Prospect. Qu'il me soit alors permis ici de remercier sincèrement et de féliciter ces institutions qui œuvrent sans relâche et avec dévouement pour apporter leurs précieuses contributions, leur précieux concours à la résolution donc, de la problématique de l'accès à l'électricité de façon générale, de l'accès à l'énergie de façon générale et à l'électricité de façon particulière. Le forum qui débute ce jour est un événement des affaires et de la finance, pour le secteur des énergies renouvelables décentralisées. Il suscite donc tout naturellement beaucoup d'espoir et constitue une nouvelle opportunité pour les différents acteurs d'être mieux outillés pour contribuer à adresser durablement les défis de l'accès à l'électricité des zones rurales en Afrique. Je voudrais donc, pour l'étoile des zones rurales en Afrique, vous indiquer qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, la Côte d'Ivoire s'est dotée de plusieurs outils pour lui permettre donc d'améliorer la qualité de l'électrification des zones rurales. Le tout premier outil, c'est notre programme national d'électrification rurale, donc qui suit son cours et qui vise à électrifier toutes les localités d'au moins 500 habitants à l'horizon 2025. Et je vous assure que nous sommes en très bonne voie donc pour le réaliser. Et le programme donc, national d'électrification rurale nous a permis aujourd'hui d'atteindre un taux de couverture, donc de passer la barre de 85% au niveau du taux de couverture. À côté de ce programme, la Côte d'Ivoire a adopté sa politique sectorielle de développement des énergies renouvelables et de l'efficacité énergétique, qui également permet donc d'améliorer notre taux de couverture et l'accès à l'électricité. Et le dernier outil donc, qui est en cours de mise en place, c'est notre plan d'action pour l'électrification hors réseau. Parce que je vous informe qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, nous disposons d'un grand nombre de campements, donc très éloignés du réseau national. Et pour ces campements, nous sommes convaincus que la solution la plus viable reste l'électrification hors réseau. Alors, je voudrais donc, à ce titre, vous inviter à tirer le maximum d'enseignements en mettant à profit donc, les précieux avis des uns et des autres, mais surtout en partageant de façon large sur les expériences réussies. Je reste persuadé, mesdames et messieurs, que le forum donc, donnera lieu à des échanges qui seront à la hauteur de nos attentes et permettra aux investisseurs et aux entrepreneurs donc, intervenant dans le domaine donc, des énergies renouvelables de tirer donc, de bons enseignements et d'avoir des partenariats, je dirais, gagnant-gagnant, des partenariats très fructueux. C'est donc sur cette note d'espoir que je voudrais formuler le vœu du plein succès donc, aux travaux et déclarer ouvert le forum d'investissement pour l'accès à l'énergie 2023. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le DG, pour votre allocution et pour l'ouverture formelle de la part du gouvernement ivoirien de ce forum. Nous passons maintenant au keynote speech qui sera donné par Monsieur Albert Fuchet, qui est le Global VP, donc le vice-président global pour l'accès à l'énergie auprès de notre société leading member Schneider Electric, pour son keynote sur la Catalysing Private Sector Investment for renewable electrification in Africa. Ce sera en anglais, donc on peut repasser. We can go back to the English version. Thank you very much, Mr. Fischer.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. All protocol observed. I have the privilege to lead the Access to Energy Global Business at Schneider Electric, which is aiming to address the 800 million people who are not yet connected to electricity, as well as 1 billion people connected to unreliable grid in remote areas. As an impact company, our goal is to connect 50 million people by 2025 and 100 million people by 2030. The objective of today's presentation is to highlight some of the main factors to accelerate private investment within the access to energy field. Renewable is important for obvious reasons of carbon emissions reduction and climate change. Renewables are one of the most affordable sources of power generation today, already cheaper than coal and diesel, for instance. The development of more renewable energy sources and the shift towards more energy-efficient production and consumption are fundamental processes for the transition to a greener economy. Electrification is important as we all acknowledge the importance of access to energy to enable development. When bringing energy to people so far deprived of it, we create most of the conditions of human development in all domains: education, health, security, food, communication, job market. One of the main obstacles in rural electrification is the high upstream investment required. Cost of expanding the main grid often exceeds returns from low connection rates in remote areas, scattered communities with relatively low consumption and ability to pay for connection. Some countries in Asia and Africa have made significant progress in connected remote rural areas to electricity through large national electrification programs and significant public investment. Unfortunately, such public effort is not possible everywhere. This is why collaboration between public and private sectors is necessary. The first condition to attract private investment is probably to create trust towards the overall ecosystem. Private investors are reluctant to invest with a clear and stable regulatory framework. A national integrated energy plan led by local authorities and jointly designed with main stakeholders is necessary to coordinate all transformations. National regulatory and implementation agencies should be fully empowered with operational autonomy from short-term pressure and accountability on targets to reach. Create conditions for resilient and flexible financing models is certainly one of the most important conditions. The introduction of a stable system of tariff and subsidies is needed, aiming to find a balance between cost recovery and customers' ability to pay. Finally, a permanent dialogue between stakeholders should happen in order to measure, evaluate results, then adapt the framework accordingly. Once conditions are in place to attract private investment, private sector will bring innovation, new products, technologies, new business models, new digital platforms. As an example, Internet of Things has opened unlimited opportunities to reduce cost, improve service continuity, and develop new digital services. Speed and flexibility. If designed accordingly, a network of rural entrepreneurs will be able to serve rural communities on a market-based model. Access to energy is not a static concept, but a dynamic process in which different technologies gradually replace previous ones, providing better services. Private sector in general, international and local companies, startups as well as local entrepreneurs are certainly the best enablers of this transformation. In many cases, in remote areas, cost of acquisitions of low-power new consumers and their maintenance are too high to be compatible with a market-based approach. Therefore, beyond sustainability and reliability, a good answer usually requires three dimensions: affordability, awareness, and availability. Affordability, because this part of the market cannot afford much and requires permanent innovation in cost reduction and performance improvement. As an example, cloud-based monitoring platforms which allow to manage multiple sites from one remote place allow to reduce dramatically operational costs while ensuring preventive and corrective actions. In addition to that, they automatically issue operational dashboards for operators and investors. Awareness, because without skills in the ground, it is impossible to implement a market-based model. All resellers, installers, services companies required to be trained on the latest technologies. A solid access to education program, mostly based on vocational trainings, is a key pillar of any deployment plan. And finally, availability, because despite logistics challenges in remote areas, product must be available within a short time for greenfield project and after-sales services. This is where this solid network of rural entrepreneurs should play its role, ensuring customer service in areas so far deprived of it. while generating enough revenue to keep the business running. I could share briefly 2 examples of access to energy implementation with private sectors. The first one is a solar electrification project in Senegal. This project is part of the solar electrification program for public and community infrastructure led by ANER, National Renewable Energy Agency, that will improve the living conditions of communities in about 700 sites. It consists in powering schools, health centers, worship places, security posts, community centers in rural areas across Senegal. As an output, this project will enhance life of almost 100,000 people. The second example is coming from India. We implemented this project in 2019 within Jharkhand state as part of a partnership between Schneider Electric and Pradhan, one of the most reputable Indian NGO in the field of rural development. We recently visited some of these villages that were electrified 3 years ago and witnessed concrete outputs. More than 400 solar irrigation pumps were installed, benefiting around 8,000 families. Farmers experienced a 3-fold increase in their incomes compared to before the project. Solar pumps enabling them to harvest 2 or 3 crops annually. After that 3 years period, we were able to identify 3 success factors. Pradhan social engineers had maintained a permanent presence in the field to provide trainings, identify issues, and implement corrective actions jointly with the solar user group. A robust local institution of women is leading this solar user group with full authority on communities. And finally, a holistic approach is adopted among all stakeholders and continuous improvement is pursued. In a nutshell, a few words of conclusion of this short presentation. There is absolutely no doubt that public-private partnerships are necessary to develop access to energy in most of our regions. A national integrated energy plan and a smart and stable regulatory framework are mandatory to reduce uncertainty and attract private investment. And as far as energy services are concerned, affordability, awareness, and availability are 3 conditions for a successful implementation. I hope that these few elements will contribute to trigger some interesting debates during this forum, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuchet, indeed, for your encouraging remarks, indeed also from private sector, and indeed, I think we can certainly learn and build on that experience, wealth of experience, I can say, with Schneider Electric. If it's okay for our esteemed opening speaker, I would like to propose a very short photo de famille. I know some of you have engagements, so if we can do that quite briefly, and then we move, to the first high-level panel. Thank you very much for bearing with us during this short interlude, but we have a ton of press running around, so it's always appreciated. So, without any further ado, I think once again our dear opening speakers, you are welcome to join on the first row. And then we move with a respectable but okay delay to the first high-level panel session, the investment in distributed renewables, topic of this event, and the clean energy transition. So where are we at? What are the big announcements that we will hear from today? No pressure. For this, we have our esteemed moderator, Temitope Udo Afia, who is the energy coordinator of our valued partner, Get Transform. Temitope, please, onto the stage. Thank you very much. After this, we will have a coffee break that is well deserved. Thank you. Temitope, to you.
Thank you very much, David. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first panel of the Energy Access Investment Forum. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions today during the panel session and during the rest of the conference. Thank you very much to our delegates for the welcome speech and the keynote speech, which really helped us to frame the discussions for today. So as David mentioned, today we will be discussing the state of play of decentralized renewable energy in Africa and some of the new initiatives that are ongoing that drive investments into DRE and the clean energy transition. Not to repeat too much of what has been said already, but I think it's important that we frame why we are having these discussions and what really is DRE and the role it plays. And we also need to think about some of the important considerations to scale decentralized renewable energy. DRE technologies play a critical role in both achieving a just and clean energy transition and also electricity access. When we talk of in off-grid rural communities, they're providing clean, reliable, and affordable electricity to these communities. In urban areas and peri-urban areas, they're providing a consistent quality of supply, improved quality of supply. And when we speak of the clean energy transition in Africa, they are providing a unique opportunity for energy independence by reducing the reliance on fossil fuels. And also they will help us to meet future generation capacities, which are currently suppressed. In turn, they're reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating climate change impacts. But how do we scale? What are the necessary building blocks to scale? We talk about bankable regulations and frameworks, energy frameworks. Here we need clear policy and regulations that are providing that environment for sustainable markets, to promote private sector participation, and then also to provide confidence that investments are secure. We need to look at a range of access to finance measures and investment measures, including the financial and fiscal framework, financial and risk mitigation approaches that are helping to provide that long-term, low-interest, low-cost financing. In tandem with the investment opportunities, we need to also remember that we need a pipeline of bankable projects that can access these fundings, because sometimes we have these fundings available, but then there's no absorption capacity within the sector. Continuous innovation in technology development that promotes more efficient, cost-effective, and reliable technologies. And finally, and part of what we're here to do in this forum, is having that coordination, collaboration, commitment across the different stakeholders, including governments, donors, investors, private sector, developers, communities. In Get Transformed, where I work, the Global Energy Transformation Program, we are supporting our national and regional public partners in developing those policies, regulations, public incentive framework that encourage investments in DRE. We also support our partners in building the institutional capacity to implement this framework, allowing room also for private sector investor feedback to ensure that the implementation is carried out in a way that promotes business model sustainability. Our system program, Get Invest, who is here, is mobilizing private investments by supporting private companies to develop a pipeline of bankable projects. They answer the question to developers on how do I access capital and support in raising that extra capital. Please look out for them in future panels today and during the rest of the forum, and also during the investments matchmaking session later on today. Today, I'm pleased to invite to the stage our leaders, a very knowledgeable mix of panelists that are both working in the public and private sector, who will discuss DRE, the role it's playing in energy transitions, and some of the key opportunities in this sector. So on this note, I would like to invite to the stage, starting with Barbel Horn, who is the Special Representative for Energy in Africa of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, Germany, BMZ. Welcome to the stage, Ms. Horn. Next, I would like to invite Gauri Singh, the Deputy Director General for the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Welcome. I would also like to invite Daniel Schroth, the Director of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Department of the African Development Bank. Welcome to the stage. Jillian Alexander Huat, the CEO, NG Energy Access. Welcome. And finally, I would like to invite Emile Mulundu, the Sub-Saharan Africa General Manager of Schneider Electric. Welcome to the stage. So we'll move on into the panel discussions now.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. To start off with our discussions, I would like to pose several questions that I would like everyone to answer. Starting from Mrs. Horn, I would like to ask you, what is the work that your organization is doing, especially some of those key initiatives that are supporting private sector-driven electrification through decentralized renewable energy?
Yes, so thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope you have a very interesting conference today. Yes, my organization is German government. So what are we doing? We're doing a lot here in Africa. So maybe first we have two institutions who are doing our work. The one is the bank, the KfW, and the other is the GIZ. And I think most of you know the GIZ. And with the KfW, we are investing in big projects. For example, West African Power Pool, and especially here in Côte d'Ivoire, we are investing a lot. And the other is the technical support that is from GIZ. And so we have different programs because we think that decentralized renewable energies are very important. On the one side, you have the national grid, but on the other side, you need decentralized solutions. Otherwise, it would be too expensive to bring the grid to every village in all this country. So you have now better solutions than we had in Europe 100 years ago. And so we have different programs. The one I'm sitting here is, for example, the national program that is a Green People's Energy program. And we are investing in, most times we are investing in productive use. So we are going to rural areas because we heard from the speakers before that half of the population in Africa have no access to electricity. And from this half of the population, 90% are living in rural areas. So we are looking for productive use and combine agriculture products with electricity. And the other is, we are doing it with other countries too, is NDEF. So most of the people here know NDEF, so that's a small component, that is solar home systems. And the other is a European program that is Get Pro, and we are putting a lot of money here in Get Pro. So, and you can see Get Invest here and you are coming from Get Pro too. So we are putting a lot of money here in matchmaking and advice and how to finance the programs. And I would say that it's not only the thinking of financing. For example, with the Green People's Energy program, we have now two sorts of financing. We have the SAY Foundation, that is a new one, was launched at the COP last year in Egypt. And the other, we are looking for small models of result-based financing, for example, with SE4O. So we have even with the Green People's Energy from the GIZ and KfW different financing instruments. But I think the problem is not only financing, but the problem is that, for example, for private investors, as we have, for example, with a SAY Foundation, we have grants, we have private money, and we have the local market, local entrepreneurs. I think it's very important for the private money that there's a security for their money. And that's something with a framework of the governments. So I think we must talk about the framework, the political will of the government, or maybe they mentioned that decentralized solutions are even a very important point.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hon. So I would like to pose the same question to Gary. What are some of the key initiatives that you're doing in this space?
So thank you, Temi, and thank you to ARE for inviting Irina to the Energy Access Investment Forum. And it's a pleasure to be here with people in the room who know much more about DRE than I know. What I do want to spend a few minutes on is to talk about what IRENA is doing. IRENA, as many of you might know, is an organization. It's an intergovernmental organization with now nearly 170 countries as members. And we do have very important knowledge products that we come out with every year. Our flagship is the World Energy Transition Outlook, which we are going to be presenting the highlights at the BTD next week. But apart from that, we also do many other reports that are very critical for building the narrative around climate change, climate actions, and also climate finance. Apart from global products, we also look at regional, we focus on regions and also on countries to give very specific assessments to see where the countries are in terms of moving ahead with renewables. So one of the initiatives that we had launched along with the UAE government in Glasgow, which was about getting $1 billion financing facility for projects, for energy transition projects in developing countries. And I'm happy to say at Sharm el-Sheikh, we were able to actually put together the $1 billion in commitments, and we are now moving forward with identifying projects from developing countries that can get financed by this partnership. And we were actually very enthused by our capacity to be able to mobilize funds. IRENA is not an implementing agency, nor do we have any plans to become one. But I think, we are a member-driven organization, and what the membership is really telling us that we need to build on the knowledge products, the analytics that we do well, but also now start trying to get, trying to support countries to put megawatts, kilowatts on the ground. And so at the assembly this year, we also had a curtain raiser for mobilizing funding for supporting decentralized renewables in the agriculture and in the health space. We really believe that when you're talking about agriculture, I think many of you here coming from developing countries understand that the farmers are actually women, because it's only the purchase of inputs and the sale of output that gets done by the men in the family, but mostly all the agriculture activities get done by women. So, and even if you look at health, whether we're looking at maternal and child care, I think it's the women in the family that are most impacted. So picking up these two sectors, working on value chains around agriculture products, we hope to spend this year in mobilizing funds for supporting countries with programmatic assistance for moving ahead in this.
Thank you, Gary. I will also pose the same question to you, Daniel. What are some of the key initiatives you're working on?
Sure. No, thank you very much, Temi, and it's a pleasure being here. Obviously, I'm based in Abidjan, so it's very much a home game, so to say. But it's also great, as Sisi Sabadi said earlier, that the EAIF is returning to Abidjan after the 2019 successful edition here. As most of you know, the bank has placed energy at the very top of its development agenda. We adopted back in 2016 the New Deal on Energy for Africa sort of as our strategy for providing Africa with access to energy. It's the first of the so-called high fives for the bank. This kind of really is in line with the term that the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon coined around energy as the golden thread for development at large. And I think this is very much sort of the inspiration also on our side, with energy at the heart, but not energy as a means in itself, but really energy for development, energy for agriculture, energy for health, a lot of the issues that were just highlighted earlier. On our side, we've had a number of key initiatives in the decentralized renewable energy space. Let me just highlight that we're sort of intervening in 3 areas, I would say. First is upstream support. This is really working with the governments, with kind of the institutions in the sector in creating the right enabling environment for private sector investments in the DRE market segment. We had launched a number of years ago the Green Mini-Grid Market Development Program, including our Green Mini-Grid Developers Help Desk that has also supported over 100 developers across the continent at different stages of development. We have now upgraded the support with the Africa Mini-Grid Acceleration Program, where we're really trying sort of to help countries reach scale, sort of develop larger programs that can attract more investments, sort of moving away from just a smaller, standalone kind of projects to larger programs. The second area of support is obviously we are a bank, so this is the downstream, the investment support that we are providing. And here I would like to highlight that we're intervening both sort of in terms of direct investments as a bank, and this obviously has to be sort of larger scale programs such as the Nigeria Electrification program that we're co-financing alongside the World Bank. It's clearly the largest sort of such program to date on the continent, but also working through financial intermediaries, some of which we have initiated and created. And I would like to highlight here the Facility for Energy Inclusion with its 2 facilities, FEI and the Off-Grid Energy Access Fund, where we were able to mobilize some of the concessional resources required to anchor more commercially oriented investors from the European Commission, from KfW as a matter of fact. And FEI is already an OJEF operational with many investments across the continent. So I think we're already at the moment sort of looking at, can this be scaled up further? And the third area of intervention is sort of an area of intervention we don't want to focus on, but it's becoming more important in the current context. This is really our ability, particularly through our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, to respond to different kind of crises and shocks that also impact the DRE sector. The Vice President referred to the COVID-19 Off-Grid Recovery Platform. We were very quick when the crisis hit back in 2020 to develop a mechanism with concessional resources from CEFA, working through existing funds that have clients that are working with many of you to deploy these funds in an efficient way and manner. And we've equally on the IPP side created our COVID-19 IPP relief program, because we see many of the projects that are actually quite advanced, that were procured competitively with low tariffs, are actually now struggling to meet these obligations because of all the cost increases as a result of the supply chain crisis. And sort of these concessional resources are intended to ensure that these projects actually happen at the end of the day. So I think this is in a nutshell sort of some of the areas we're focusing on. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Also to Julian, what are some of the key initiatives that NG is working on?
Thank you for, hello everyone, very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for the same question. We do things as well. We are a leading company in the off-grid sector. We are combining, and I think we are one of the only one on the sector to combine SHS, so solar kit, individual one, with mini-grids in an objective to demonstrate that the best way to reach SDG 7 is a collaborative and inclusive approach, which means that, as it had been said very clearly during the opening remark, it cannot be done by the grid itself alone, cannot be done by SHS itself alone, or mini-grid alone. The best way to address accessibility to reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy is by a combined approach. So that's what we do at first. Then, of course, we have added to that principle all the digital features that are needed to accelerate trade, to accelerate transactions in a very open manner and very secured manner. Of course, you all know pay-as-you-go methodology and systems, and we are, of course, using that. From an impact perspective, as from today, we have provided electricity to 10 million people. That's still a drop in the ocean when we know that we need to reach over 700 million people. But that's our first, let's say, contribution to reaching universal access to energy. We combine innovation as well. In Africa, NG Energy Access is around 1,850 employees. 1,750 are in Africa. We are present in different countries outside Africa in order to strengthen our supply chain, but in Africa, we are also developing our center of expertise, our research and development, let's say, departments, in order to make sure that we bring innovation in the solutions that we provide to our customers. And solutions are coming in two ways. Technology, of course. How can we make more with less? How can a battery can power more usages with less capacity in order to become even more affordable? But also from a financing perspective, and thanks, I'm very happy to be with all of you on this panel because I am one of the receivers of all your good initiatives, so very happy about that. How can we include climate financing into our activities? We have signed today, and you may have seen the press release, with Carbon Clear. How do we use carbon credits in a way to make our product even more affordable? Very good initiative on that. So we don't leave any stone unturned. Our mission and our values is really to bring those products at the very least cost possible. How can we make that? By trying to reach, let's say, exceptional operational excellence. And how do we do that? Is by creating synergies between our countries. We are present in 9 countries in Africa so far. And also by trying to improve internal processes and collaboration with institutions, but also with authorities and partners in countries in order to deliver the best product, the best solution possible. What I'm quite proud to say is that after the integration of the 3 companies that we are, let's say, composed of, a company for mini-grid, which was called Power Corner before, Phoenix and Mobisol on the SHS side, we have breached sustainability as of end of 2022, which give us the means also to hire more, to develop more, and to try to be and do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. To Emile, I will also pose the same question to you. What are the key initiatives Schneider is working on?
Thank you. First of all, it is important for me to tell to these people what Schneider is and what it is not. Schneider is a worldwide company with more than 140,000 people working around the world. We are present in a lot of countries, more than 100. And we are very committed to climate change question, to better life of people by bringing electricity and our technology to them. So in terms of energy, electricity, Schneider has developed a program called Access to Energy in 2009. And this program is implementing a lot of things to concept some product and solution to bring energy to people, what we call in our language, people of the bottom of the pyramid. That means a lot of them are in Africa, for example. When talking about 700 million of people with electricity, we know that 2/3 of them are in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are working a lot to bring to them our solution in order to allow them to have electricity in affordable price. Schneider is dedicating between 4 and 5% of its revenue to the research and development. So that allows us to create good solutions, strong solutions that are not expensive for people. So our ambition is to attain 50 million people up to 2025 with clean, just clean electricity. The program is based on 3 pillars. The first one is to have product, to have solution, as I said. The second one is to upskill people who are using this product. So we are a program of training, a program of entrepreneurship, and also we have a program of funding, because we know that and we believe in that. It is important for local communities to take this solution, to take this formula, and to make them own, because they can use them well if they know how this works and how they can do to make them sustainable. The other axis that Schneider is working on is how to reduce our consumption of electricity in the traditional way, what we have today, how to make it more sustainable, more reliable, by reducing consumption from everyone, and to make it as longer as possible for next generation, for future generation. So this is how I can summarize our effort in this point. Thank you.
Thank you. So from the first discussions, what I'm seeing is whether it's taking this cross-sectional approach in the private sector, when we are not only focusing on one technology, but also looking at multiple technologies, working at how you work with different players, or even this approach in the public sector, where you're not only looking at the funding, but you're looking at technical assistance, you're looking at different ways of structuring the funding, and with Irina bringing in some of those knowledge, the knowledge that you've done in research and exploration into the funding. So this is interesting, and I think this is how the sector should work. We should always take this cross-sectoral approach in how we design our support programs. So I'm going to move on to the next set of questions, and I would like to start with you, Emily. In Schneider, what are some of the biggest challenges that you are facing in promoting some of these activities, and how are you working to address these challenges?
Well, that is something we know all, that the main obstacle in this way is the high cost of the solution. That is the high cost of investment. Bringing energy, renewable energy to people could be easy if materials, if solution was not expensive. But today, the experience we have, that is very, very expensive. So that is the main obstacle. So thanks to technology, because since some years, prices are decreasing. So we hope that in future years, this technology could be very, how to say it, not cheap, but the just middle for people. So for us, yes, this main obstacle is that we are facing, and also our partners worldwide are facing too. So we are working to find the right way to make it easy for everyone. As I said, we have a center of research and development working to find material to develop this solution. And Schneider today is trying to solve this by doing collaboration with other companies, with collective, with public, with sector, private sector partners, to do together, to allow to each of us to support a part of the solution and to make it available.
Thank you. Also to Gillian, what are some of the challenges you're facing in implementing these projects?
Okay, I think that all the challenges have been mentioned already during the opening session, and I do agree with all of them. Let's try to be a little bit more practical then. The challenges can be the same between, for instance, SHS and mini-grid, and sometimes they are different. In terms of SHS, it's a mass market. You try to reach anyone very far, the very last mile, and that's the most complicated thing, because even in some of those areas, there is no network availability. So if you try to use, for instance, mobile money, there is no network, no phone. So how do you manage to be able to reach that place with a very, very affordable product? To come back to your first challenge, which is the price. So how the incentives or how the subsidies are framed in order to allow that to happen. So are there, for instance, VAT exemptions? Is it a way to provide a result-based financing? Is it an additional approach that would help you to partner in order to be successful on the last mile? When we look at mini-grid, it's more infrastructure. And it's quite interesting to look at it from an even bigger perspective. In my opinion, mini-grids are definitely not different from IPPs. They are exactly the same, to one single difference. They are very small. And so all the difficulties that you have for an IPP of 300 megawatt solar farm somewhere, you have it for a 20 kilowatt, a 50, a 100, and 150. And so the structure should be adapted in order to make sure that we can diverse the risk with a certain volumes in order to have economy of scale. So how can we bid mini-grid in a way that volumes happen on the number of them, but not necessarily on the size, because then the demand becomes the most critical part. How do you make sure that people will consume energy to a level which match your business plan? And so again, if you go one level down, how can we include in financing of appliances? Because what does make the consumption is the use of certain appliances in a village. How do you push further productive usages that then will lift up the economical environment in a specific area? And then you are creating a virtuous circle that at the moment is sometimes difficult to reach because tenders are either too small, either too diverse, or taking so much time that, as it has been said, the technology that you selected has moved. So agility also is important. And to come back to what I said earlier, it's a collaboration. This won't happen if the private sector does it by itself, without the support of the authorities, in an integrated way. Otherwise, your mini-grid will get encroached, as we say, and with the support of institutions in order to make the framework sustainable and long-term view enough to create the stability that is needed for investments.
Thank you. And so, it's interesting that you also mentioned, and also during the previous discussions, we talked about energy not just for energy, but energy for a purpose, and energy for industrialization. And I know that Mrs. Horn, Gowrie, Daniel, they all touched on some of the initiatives that they're working on towards that. But Daniel, I would also like to pose this question to you in both ways. How are some of those co-financing structures supporting in meeting some of these challenges by the private sector? And then what are some of the challenges that you face in running those facilities and implementing them for the sector?
Sure, no, thank you. And I'm going to build on some of the points raised just earlier. I think I'm going to focus on three key challenges that we see. One is, and I alluded to it earlier briefly, around size and sort of the transaction cost. Clearly, if we sort of are to invest in one small mini-grid from a transaction cost perspective, it does not make sense for an institution such as the African Development Bank to do so. So how are we addressing this? I think there are really two ways. One is to work through intermediaries, I mentioned earlier the Facility for Energy Inclusion. We created a facility which is now managed by Lionshead Global Partners precisely because we wanted to find ways to also support smaller scale transactions that are too small for the bank to invest in directly. And the second kind of approach is to really look and work with countries on larger programmatic approaches. So if we're not looking at one mini-grid, but we're looking at 300 mini-grids, let's say. So we're working, for example, with Togo on a tender for 317 localities to be implemented by the private sector through mini-grids, where we will come in with concessional finance to kind of make this happen. Similarly, we're working with DRC, which is more on the large-scale mini-grid side, or mesogrid, with the Moye project, where there was a competitive tender for 3 major cities, and we have sort of on our side mobilized sort of some of the staple finance from our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, from resources we mobilized from the Green Climate Fund, and this can all then be blended with our private sector lending in that project. The second is obviously the fundamental challenge around profitability and affordability, and I think it was alluded to, sort of this kind of tension, and I think it's sort of an increased tension in the current context when there are severe challenges for many kind of people, particularly in rural areas, to be able actually to pay. And at the same time, it's good to hear that ENGIE is sort of reaching profitability, but we still see many companies that are actually not profitable yet. So how do we kind of get to profitability in sort of a current difficult context? So I think there are two avenues that we're sort of looking at. One is really around demand stimulation, it was highlighted, productive uses. In fact, I'm just coming back over the weekend from Ethiopia, where we're working with the Global Energy Alliance on a very exciting program that is looking at the nexus between energy and agriculture, and particularly irrigation. Sort of mini-grids in rural areas with anchor load being provided through irrigation, which can help cross-subsidize then the access for the residential customers. And it would really be the first time in Ethiopia that you have sort of private sector model also addressing some of the larger bankability issues that sort of the private sector has faced in the Ethiopian context. But I think these are sort of the type of solutions that we need to scale up at far beyond sort of this pilot scale that we're currently working on in Ethiopia. The second is obviously further cost reductions that are necessary. Very clearly, I think the market has sort of improved in terms of the cost per kilowatt hour, but it's still not at the level where it has to be on the mini-grid side. I think the target would be sort of 20 US cents per kilowatt hour. I think that's sort of one of the targets being promoted also from the industry side. But I think in that context, we also need to make sure that we sort of segment the markets to some extent. There are clearly some areas that are prone for commercial investments. There are other areas where maybe it's sort of bridge markets. I think this is also what Husk and AMDA in their study end of last year highlighted. But there might be some areas where, in fact, it's very difficult to see a model for kind of the private sector, where there will have to be a continued role for the public sector in sort of providing access to those parts of the population. And then so just very quickly, the third one is really around the policy, legal, regulatory challenges, particularly in the mini-grid area where grid encroachment, kind of clarity, what happens when the grid arrives, licensing processes, all these aspects are really, really important. And there are very good examples in Africa where these issues have been addressed. I think Nigeria is a good one. In fact, they're now sort of starting a process of reviewing sort of the regulations that have been put in place, also with the support of GIZ and others a couple of years ago. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Gary, also, I would pose the same question to you. You have this viewpoint where you are able to see the global perspective, but also starting to mobilize funding towards this project. What are some of the key challenges that you're seeing, and how are you addressing them?
So, Temi, I think, typically our counterparts for the last decade have been ministries of energy. And when you start moving into the space of DRE, and especially when you're talking about productive use, we're really moving away from our comfort zone into speaking to the ministries of agriculture, into speaking to ministries of health. And what we are finding is that the ministries of agriculture and ministries of health are much more public-centric, public sector-centric. And, the space for private sector engagement is still very limited, which is surprising because if you look at agriculture, it's really a private sector-led space. But, so it's an approach that we have to take of actually talking to them about looking at policy frameworks that are much more enabling in terms of looking at private sector actively, looking at aggregators and the role of aggregators, looking at opening up the space for youth, for communities, for women to participate in this, and be able to also take advantage of financing flows that can come from the DFIs and others. And I think that is something, and very importantly, I think, policies often tend to be either very technology-centric or very solution-oriented. So saying that these are the kind of solutions we're looking for. And I think they need to really open up to let 1,000 flowers bloom, because business ideas and business plans and for the private sector to come in and create their own revenue models, I think it's important for the policy to enable all of that. So that's something that we are seeing as a challenge. I'm not saying that we are not making headway into it, because there is a lot of receptivity in these ministries as well to open up the space. But I come from a government background, and I've worked in the government for many years. And there's this stickiness about policy. It's very difficult to shift it. But all of us here have to make that effort to shift it, because the problems are so huge. We're sitting in West Africa, and I think I mean, while at one level, at the global level, we have this number of investments in the energy transition technologies reaching 3 trillion US dollars, which is really a record. But at the other end, we're sitting in an area where the LDCs are the ones which have the greatest access deficit, and that access deficit is growing. So if I look at just sub-Saharan Africa, where in the last decade you had a population increase of about 26 million, the population that got access to energy was just 8 million. So we are really running a race that we need to really amp up our efforts, and in the opening panel we did here that we need to really treble our efforts to really reach the goals that we have as a global community set for ourselves. So let me stop there.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, to Mrs. Horn, with the complexities of this work with funding with KFW and also through the technical assistance with GIZ, what are some of the challenges that you experience in working in the sector?
I think if we are talking about decentralized energies, we have to talk and think in a really different direction than when we are talking about centralized systems. Because when I'm going to countries, I first ask, I would like to visit project that failed, because we have to learn from our mistakes. So one of the mistakes is I came to a hospital and saw 5 solar systems and one only was working. Because they get the first one as a donation, then they use it, then it's broke, then they ask the next organization and get the next one, and that is not sustainable. So when we are talking about installation of decentralized solutions, we have to talk about participation of the population who are using the systems, and we have to talk about training and education. So they are able to look for a good maintenance. Another example, I went to a village and one of the systems, the mini-grids, doesn't work. So a small component was broken and then it was over. you know. So when we are talking about financing systems, we must talk about, as I said, donation, private capital, but also very important, a private company that is looking for the maintenance. And this company will get money from the population in the village for the electricity. And then they are looking for good maintenance, otherwise they will lose the income. So it's very important to have a really concrete connection to the village, and then look for a good maintenance and participation of the population, maybe of the community or maybe by a private company. But that is very important. And the other way is that it's very important to talk with the ministries, because I think a lot of countries are looking very in the centralized direction. So they are looking for a national grid, and then every household must have a connection to the national grid. So when I last time stayed here in Côte d'Ivoire, I went to one of the households and said, oh, that's really fine, you have now, so I went there, so that was not a plan, I went in a house, you know, and I was talking with a family there, and I said, oh, here's now the grid, you have the connection to the grid, and I see a lot of electric instruments here, so that's really fine. And she said, yes, that's fine, but I can't use all this electrical instruments because I don't have the money, because I have to pay for the costly access to the grid. And if you are thinking about the price for the access to the grid, and put maybe $50 up to that, she could get a solar home system with a lot of equipment, and at the end has the electricity for free. Here, in this point, she has to pay for the electricity. And I think that's a new thinking, because we have here the possibility that we have a lot of different solutions. And then we can look for the best solution. And that's why I think it's very important to have a connection and networks between the countries, not between Germany or Europe and Africa, but between different countries in Africa. Why it is working in some countries in a better way, why you can install decentralized solutions in some countries better than in others, and then look for good ideas and learn from this, and maybe you can learn from each other, because every country has a good idea. And so it's very important to have these conferences we make with our Green People's Energy. We make webinars, we make networking, we made even bringing the people together, and even we are supporting this conference, because it's so important to learn from each other and then look for the best solution.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hon. So, thank you to all the panelists. One thing I will take away is definitely, and I think Mrs. Hon and Daniel, you touched on it, on this, there will always be challenges. Different countries will have their different challenges, but we have a lot of similarities in the project, and it's this continuous learning, continuous exchanges. If there are other countries where they have been through some of these pain points and learned lessons about the pain points, let's have these discussions and exchanges. Let's also have the exchanges outside of energy also, because energy is for a purpose. Let's have it with agriculture, health, etc. So thank you very much to all the panelists. I would now like to open the floor up to a quick 10 minutes Q&A session. I ask that if you have any questions for the panelists, you first introduce your name, your organization, your position, and who your question is addressed to. So I'll open it up for Q&A now.
Thank you very much. My name is Obinna Agu. I'm the CEO Ventura Logistics Service Limited, a mini-grid developer based in Nigeria. My question is, I'm directing it to the fund providers, AFDP and others, GIZ and so on, and also to an OEM, Schneider. Now, some of us coming, for me, this is the first time I'm coming to this forum, and I have a target that before I leave at the end, I must have connected to an investor or investors, because we have pipeline projects. In Nigeria, yes, I read NEP, they are doing very well, very, very well. We have some projects we've done with them on mini-grid that are working, and then we have pipeline, and then we have other ones, other construction. So the issue is in Nigerian market, raising capital from the commercial bank. Some of them are good, yes. We work with FCMB. You can raise capital within 3 to 4 months. But because the programs under NEP are time sensitive, if you delay in accessing funding, you default in accessing the grant. The subsidy grant, they are okay. Government policies, they are perfect. The regulator NEC and then the government agency ROA, they are very good, to make sure that we deliver based on the government policy. Now, the issue is access to funds. Now, I'm thinking on this kind of platform that OEM like Schneider can say, okay, hi, Obina, if you have projects under construction, if you can use my equipment, then let the people, the investors just pay us, then we deliver to you. Then we scale up faster that way. Or if Schneider in Lagos office can do warehousing, making their product available for local developers, so that we don't have to wait 1 month, 2 months to procure, then it will help us to scale up. So these are things I'm bringing to the table here. So the fund provider, the AFDB, and then the OEM, what can we do, to synergize across, different platforms to make this happen, to make access to finance easy, and to bring products close to the people.
Ask that you quickly,
Thank you.
So we can give the opportunity for others to answer. All right, yes, please. Who would like to start with?
Right, let me attempt to respond on Nigeria more specifically. I mean, as you know, there's the large Nigeria Electrification program under implementation. On our side, we've just launched a tender very recently. In addition, in Nigeria, we invested also a couple of years ago equity into the Nigeria Infrastructure Debt Fund, NIDF, which is also starting to look at supporting some of the developers in the mini-grid space. For example, I think Havenhill benefited from support from NIDF not too long ago. And similarly, I think what is really critical in Nigeria and other markets is that the local commercial banks get more engaged, lend to these companies such as yours. It's not going to be sufficient that just the international DFI community provides funding, but we really need to get more of the local financial institutions involved in the market. And in this context, I'm pleased to highlight, the VP Vice President mentioned it earlier, that we have a new program, the Leveraging Energy Access Finance Framework, LEAF in short, which also benefits from $173 million of concessional resources from the Green Climate Fund, and is focusing initially on 6 countries, one of which being Nigeria. And the intention is to provide like partial credit guarantees, subordinated debt, to really allow some of the local financial institutions to be able to lend more to the companies working in the DRE space. So I hope that these kind of solutions will help to address some of your concerns. Thanks.
Yes, with the Green People's Energy, we are not involved in Nigeria, but in Benin, and I think even the GIZ has some energy projects in Nigeria. So, and what we are doing, for example, in Benin, is that we are looking for the system of result-based financing. So we are talking with local entrepreneurs, because one of our goals is to strengthen local entrepreneurs. And it's very important because we would like to create jobs. That is one of our main goals, and we would like to look for income and even for the local population. So yes, we have our pavilion there in the exhibition, and a big pavilion. I saw, really. And we will stay there with our GIZ teams the whole days. And then you come with your question, and maybe we can look for a solution.
So we can take 2 more questions. Or who has the mic? Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So, je m'appelle Abdoulaye Ba, du secteur privé des énergies renouvelables du Sénégal. Donc, je suis le vice-président du Conseil patronal des énergies renouvelables du Sénégal, qui est une association qui regroupe donc les IPP, les mini-grids operators, les distributeurs de kits solaires et des bureaux de consultance. Donc, le Sénégal a eu à atteindre ses 30% dans le mix énergétique des énergies renouvelables grâce à nos membres. Donc, les 30% des énergies renouvelables sont réalisés par nos membres. Mais moi, je suis un peu confus, c'est pourquoi je vous interpelle tous. Merci de vos informations et de la présentation, mais je suis un peu perdu dans tout ça, puisque le titre de l'affaire, ou bien du podium, c'est Investment in Decentralized Energy, donc investissement dans les énergies renouvelables. Le Sénégal est un pays pilote dans la sous-région. D'ici la fin de l'année, certainement le DG de l'ASE ne va pas me démentir, on aura 750 mini-réseaux au Sénégal, pour le compte de l'État du Sénégal. Mais malheureusement, tout ce qu'on a constaté à vue, tous ces mini-réseaux ont été réalisés dans le cadre des partenaires techniques et financiers, c'est-à-dire que ce soit la GIZ, ou bien que ce soit l'AFDU, ou bien tous les partenaires financiers. Donc cela veut dire quoi? Tous les équipements, 80% des équipements énergie renouvelables sont importés. Donc les appels d'offres qu'on fait au Sénégal ou bien dans la sous-région, comme je suis également dans la sous-région, donc les réalisations se font par les locaux. Moi, ma question que je me pose, est-ce que vous parlez de ces types d'intervention comme des investissements? Si tel est le cas, où est le secteur privé local? Où est le contenu local dans tout ça? Ça, c'est une première question. La deuxième question, est-ce que vous voulez créer, surtout la Banque africaine de développement, des champions des énergies renouvelables d'ici 20? Parce qu'on doit devenir des champions. On n'est pas là seulement, quand même, à être les petits installateurs. Donc, je fais vraiment cet appel. Je suis un peu confus dans le cadre des investissements que vous dites. La plupart de l'argent, ce sont des accords bilatéraux ou bien des offres spontanées, telles que KfW-IPEX, pour ne pas nommer par exemple Gauf au Sénégal, qui va réaliser 300 centrales. Les Indiens font la même chose, les Chinois la même chose. Où est le contenu local dans tout ça? Surtout au niveau de la Banque africaine de développement. Nous devons avoir des champions dans ce secteur. Merci.
Good morning.
Can I respond in French?
Yes.
Monsieur merci pour la question. Votre question englobe beaucoup de choses. Effectivement, il faut des champions locaux. Ça, tout le monde en a conscience. La question, c'est comment on fait. Il est tout à fait normal que ces solutions, au début, viennent des pays développés, puisque c'est là où elles sont conçues, elles sont fabriquées. Ça, c'est normal. Le point le plus important, c'est comment on fait pour créer ces champions locaux. Et je pense que tous les panélistes l'ont dit. Aujourd'hui, il existe des banques qui s'intéressent à des financements privés. Il y a des institutions régionales, sous-régionales, mondiales, comme la BAD, qui regardent ces questions-là. Et je pense qu'il faut que ceux qui ont la volonté et la capacité de devenir des champions locaux s'intègrent dans ces programmes-là. Je l'ai dit, par exemple, j'ai parlé des fonds qui sont soutenus par des groupes comme Schneider, comme Engie, comme Société Générale, pour ne pas les citer, mais il y en a beaucoup à travers le monde. Donc, en fait, il faut s'intéresser pour entrer dans ces démarches-là et venir avec des propositions qui puissent tenir, parce que, comme on l'a dit, le problème est le même. La cible, c'est des populations assez pauvres. On a des solutions qui, aujourd'hui, sont encore très hautes. Comment on fait pour les aider, pour qu'elles puissent s'approprier ces solutions et soient capables de les porter demain elles-mêmes, sans forcément l'aide de ceux qui les ont apportées. Et donc, c'est toute la problématique et c'est ensemble qu'on doit résoudre. Et il faut venir avec des solutions, des propositions. Il y a des forums qui se font à travers le monde pour discuter. Je pense.
Maybe just very quickly to add to what was just said. First of all, indeed, Senegal is already, I think, in many respects, a champion when it comes to renewable energy in Africa. On our side, I think the aspect of local content is extremely important. We're currently undertaking, in the context of our flagship Desert to Power program, that is sort of looking at the Sahel in terms of solar solutions, at undertaking a study on the opportunities for solar manufacturing in Africa, but particularly focus on the Sahel. There are obviously many issues that sort of come into play, but this is really sort of the direction of travel that ultimately we have to come to. So it cannot just be Africa depending on imports, whether it's from China or elsewhere. But it's obviously an effort that will require a lot of support. It's sort of industrial development at large. But it's sort of, we hope that the study will give some clear indications of how we can move forward in that direction.
Yes, in Senegal, we are financing a lot of productive use with our Green People's Energy, and really good projects, for example, for all the farmers, bring all their milk and making some yogurt and some other products, and then they can sell it in the cities. So that's really, especially for rural areas, a very, very good income project, and even others. So we are doing a lot in Senegal. So that is not really the problem. And even now, I think because we have and because of COVID-19 and because of the war in Ukraine, we have an increase of energy prices, and we have, for example, the disruption supply chain, so the costs are higher, and so it's a bit more easy, for example, for installing solar, because solar makes you more independent from fossil fuels imports and high prices. And I think so now the situation is better than 3 years ago. And for example, in Senegal, I had a good talks with a lot of investments. They would like to change their diesel generator by solar, because this investment comes back in only 2 or 3 years. So there are a lot of possibilities even in Senegal, but even in other countries too.
Good morning. Juste pour oui. Juste pour répondre à votre question également, cette question nous est posée fréquemment, en tout cas à notre organisation, en se posant la question, est-ce que vous pouvez créer vos produits vous-même? Est-ce que vous voulez créer vos batteries vous-même? Il y a 2 ou 3 raisons pour lesquelles on ne le fait pas. De 1, notre objectif et notre mission est de fournir des produits les plus abordables possibles. Donc on a besoin d'économies d'échelle. Donc comme un fournisseur d'électricité, descendre plus bas dans la création du produit qui crée cette électricité, je reste de toute façon très petit. Je n'arriverai pas à avoir des volumes qui vont me permettre d'être compétitif par rapport à des sociétés dont l'activité principale est la création de ces produits. Deuxième chose, il n'y a pas d'accord de libre-échange entre les pays africains. Donc même si nous, en tant qu'Engie, nous sommes présents dans 9 pays et que je choisis un pays où je veux commencer à construire ces produits moi-même, je vais payer autant de taxes et peut-être même plus de taxes que de l'importer de l'extérieur. Et les taxes, après, rendent mes produits encore moins abordables. Mon objectif est de pouvoir fournir de l'énergie au prix le plus abordable. Donc je dois chercher les économies d'échelle, je dois chercher les solutions qui permettent de descendre le prix le plus bas possible. Si on résout cette équation, dans ce cas-là, oui, je suis certain qu'il est possible de construire des produits en Afrique, et j'en serai très heureux.
So thank you very much. I'm afraid we won't be able to take any more questions. We're running short on time, but I would propose please do visit the pavilions and approach the panelists if you would like to engage them further. I would like to thank all of you for the really engaging, interesting discussions today. And I look forward to listening on in the rest of the panel sessions and some of the brain dead sessions as well. And I wish everyone in the room a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will have a coffee break of 20 minutes. On aura une pause café de 20 minutes. Le café est servi principalement à la salle des expositions. Donc vous sortez et il y a une grande tente, c'est là où il y a le café. The coffee break is in the exhibition area, just opposite. You go through the exit, and just on the other side there's a huge tent, which is the exhibition area. See you there.
And we often talk also to reach SDG 7. But we tend to forget where the SDG comes. So by D, I mean the development part. And one of the questions I try to ask to people in panels, but even when I'm speaking about these things, is how are we making sure that actually the solutions we are bringing to the distributed renewable space are really being able to enable, enabling of the socioeconomic development, meaning if I provide a TV to a rural area in which they are seeing the Barca